Welcome everybody to the UNnormalized podcast. This is your host Frankie A, and I'm really excited today about this next guest that I have coming on. I'm such a huge fan. Today I have with me Richard Brake. You probably will know him best from a lot of films. His resume of work is just phenomenal. But he was in Batman Begins, he was in Black Dahlia, The Kingsman, Hannibal Rising, Ray Donovan. One of my favorite shows that I love, Bastard Executioner. He's also Doomshead from 31. And you may also recognize or may not recognize Mr. Brake from his role as the Night King in Game of Thrones. And currently he's in an awesome Rob Zombie movie that's out in theaters. Well, it's going to be coming back out in theaters. Three from Hell, which was phenomenal. So welcome, Richard, to the show. I really appreciate you being with me today.
Thanks, Frankie. It's nice to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. So, Richard, why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about your background? I like to kind of start off with that with guests because I find it very interesting, their background, because it kind of lends to who they are today, and it kind of sets the tone for the journey in the life unnormalized. So, like, just tell us a little bit about where you're from and that kind of stuff.
Sure. I was born in a small Welsh village. Actually, I was. I was born in a village that most people can't pronounce the name if they're not from Wales, called Ystrad Mynach, which is actually
Wow.
spelled mostly with consonants.
Okay.
Yscrad Mynch, Ystrad Mynach. It's a small mining village.
Okay.
Just outside of Cardiff, which is the capital of Wales. So I was born there many years ago, and when I was young, we moved to the States. So basically, it was in the kind of late '60s, and my very Welsh parents uprooted myself and my brother, and we all moved to Atlanta, Georgia,
Wow.
which, as you can imagine, I think it was 1967 we
Okay.
moved. As you can imagine, nowadays, people move around all the time, and obviously, like literally, I fly back and forth to the U.S. I live in London, but I fly back and forth 15 times a year at least, so it's nothing to move around. Whereas back in the 60s, obviously, air travel was, it was expensive. People didn't move very often from especially small Welsh villages, so it was a huge move, and
Hmm.
it was a massive culture shock.
I was
Also,
just
we're
gonna
kind
say
of
that.
used to, we're used to like other cultures now because the internet shows us, what's going on in different places. We could just Google Astramantic and see what it looks like, or we can Google Atlanta and see what it looks like. But, for my parents and probably less so for me because I was only two, but, for my brother who was 9, I think, it was a huge change.
Oh,
But they did
absolutely.
it. They moved and we lived there well, we didn't live in Atlanta very long. We kind of moved to North Carolina and we moved around a lot. So my childhood, I moved back to England for a couple of years when I was a teenager and then back to the States. So most of my childhood was in the States, mostly in the South, although I lived in Ohio, went to high school in Ohio. So that's why I'm a Cleveland Indians fan and Cleveland Browns fan, even though they're not very good. But the Indians look like they're about to not make the playoffs. But there you go. Um, however, and then when I went to university, I went to Duke,
Okay.
and after that, I then lived a little bit in New York, but decided I needed to go back. I wanted to study more. So getting into the act, I started acting when I was 17 in high school, and then I knew when I was at Duke I wanted to be an actor, so I studied it there to some extent. And then when I went after a year or so, I got accepted to a drama school in London, where I
Okay.
went. I moved to London when I was 22 or something, 23, something like that. And since then, I've kind of always had a home in London because I just love it here. But I've spent a long time. I lived in LA for long periods of time and a little bit in New York, and then but always kind of had a base here. And nowadays, partly because I've obviously slightly more established actor, and also because now with the internet we can you know tape auditions or talk to directors on Skype, or so I don't need to spend as much time in LA as I used to. So I can just go there to work, or go there to do
Yeah.
occasional meetings. So, and I can really make London my home because I have a few kids, and I love cities that are more compact. LA's a little spread out for me. I'm more of a compact guy. I like New York. I like London. I love visiting LA. I love working in LA, but I'm happy that I live here. So yeah, I moved around a lot. We moved around. I went to maybe 10 different schools,
Wow.
over the course of my life. And I think that was a big factor in why I became an actor. Really,
Yeah,
that sense
I
of
was
always being somewhere different.
yeah, I was just gonna ask you like when you were going to when you were in college, in university, you kind of decided to get into being an actor. What was the that defining moment like for you? Like what made you say, like when did you get bit by the acting bug and say like this is something that I want to do beyond it just being like a passion, or like some people get into local theater or things like that to kind of satisfy that acting itch that they may have. When
Yeah,
did you decide like, wow, like this is something that I want to pursue as a professional career?
yeah. It's like with any good story, it always starts with a woman. So I was in high school. I was 17, so I was in my senior year of high school. Had never really thought about acting. I'd done a lot of writing. Like I wanted to be a writer when I was younger, really. And I was sitting outside of the school steps with my best friend who had done a little bit of acting. He was sort of into it a bit more, and we were sitting there, and a pretty fellow co-ed came out and said that they needed more men to audition for the school play because there was not enough men auditioning. I think it was The Crucible, Arthur Miller's The
Ooh.
Crucible, and they didn't have enough men. So my friend said, look, it's it's quite fun, man. We should do it. We should go for it. And I was like, all right, I will, because I wanted to, because that girl was so damn good looking. I was like, if she's doing it, I'm doing it. So I basically followed her back in, and definitely got a part because I think literally there was enough men auditioning for the number of roles. So it wasn't exactly due to my talent that I got cast as, I think, Judge Danforth in The Crucible. And we were about 2 weeks into rehearsals, and I remember I was walking back after rehearsals with that same friend, and I had been having so much fun with the process of not even the going on stage yet, because we hadn't even done that bit, but with just the process of rehearsing and kind of just the whole thing. I'd been the most fun I'd ever had, and I'd done sports, and I'd done all kinds of stuff in school, but I never enjoyed myself or felt so free. I remember turning to him and saying, I really remember this moment, saying, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And from that point, now when that was 30 something years ago, I'm really grateful that, I'm still doing this, for the rest of my
Well,
life, that I literally
thank
have
God
done that.
thank God for that that woman that you saw. And now,
Yeah.
is this somebody that you're with
And I
today or
never
no?
even dated her either. And
Oh, never dated. Oh,
I
okay.
never even had no interest in
Well,
me. There you go. But
well,
she definitely set me on the right path.
well, you know what? Thank God, because if it wasn't for her, we wouldn't get to reap the benefits of everything that you're doing now. So, that I mean, the Crucible is a great, even
Yeah.
first kind of play to be in. I mean, that's like one of my favorites. So,
Yeah. It's a great
yeah,
play.
yeah, great. So from there, how did you like? Would you come from a family that um, supported you in that journey? Kind of like it seems
Yeah.
like that was like the crossroads. I always love talking to people about the crossroads because that's like the defining moment where you can go the conventional route, or this kind of thing comes up in your life, and then you say, man, I'm really gonna take it. I'm really gonna follow my heart. I'm really gonna follow my passion. And sometimes families, they especially parents, I'm a parent, you're a parent, so you kind of know like what that's like to you want to keep your kids secure and give them the best, less burden route of life. So were your family supportive of you, Richard, when you kind of said, hey, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
This is what I'm going to do.
One of the things that they were very, my father was a businessman. My mother later in life became a very successful businesswoman. I mean, they were very traditional in that sense that, they they wanted, they valued security, and that makes, because they came from, both of their parents were coal miners
Oh,
in
wow.
Wales. So they really worked their way up from, being the children of coal miners to a very successful business people themselves. And but they were always very supportive. The only thing, they were sensible. They said, look, because I mean, obviously, I had only just gotten this idea into my head when I was a senior in high school. So I got accepted to a number of universities, and Duke was one. And they're like, well, why don't you go get a degree? Because obviously at this point I could have jumped on a train and gone to, or a plane and gone to Los Angeles and pursued my dreams. But they said, go get a degree. So I got an English and drama degree at Duke, and I continued acting there. And I think it was my first play there was The Little Prince. Do you know that story? The
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I think it's a French children's book, really, but it's quite a good philosophical tale. And I played the Little Prince, believe it or not. I was about 6'2", but it was brilliantly done production of this story. And I think my parents came to see that, and that was even my freshman year. And at that point, my father, who was the more conservative of the two, said, if this is what you want to do, go for it. So they were really supportive right from the beginning. Obviously, like I said, I did the sensible thing of at least getting a degree and having some backup to an extent. But basically, they were 100% behind me. And then when I went to New York for a year after school, they were there, fully supporting me. And then I decided to go to drama school and study some more. And they were incredibly supportive, helped me out financially as well as emotionally, and backing me up the whole time. So I think it's really anyone who's pursuing, as you call it, alternative kind of life, in a more risky thing like the arts. It's really important, I think, to have, or very beneficial to have, support from family. So, I'm very,
Yeah.
very lucky that, I had 100% support from both of my parents in this pursuit. Because and likewise, I try to do the same. I have two older children. I have a 20-year-old who's looking to be a filmmaker, and a 17-year-old who's a musician, and I support them to just pursue what they love, because I think it's really important if you're going to do this, whether it be an actor or a musician or an artist or a filmmaker or a writer, if it's what you love, you just got to pursue it 100%, and go for it. And it really helps to have parents that are behind you on that.
Absolutely, and that's why I always ask the question, because even what I do for my day job, I talk to people about support, and anything you do that you're trying to pursue. Like you said, when you have that support system behind you, it not only for the support, but it kind of solidifies that maybe that it is the right decision, because people believe in what you're doing. So, you know, that makes you kind of want to say, okay, I really want to develop this thing, and do it the best I can. And especially with anything in the arts. I'm not a big sports guy, but I am a big lover of all things in the arts. And it is a tough road, but when you have that support, especially from parents as children, it lends to you creating or developing that craft, because what you do, Richard, is definitely a craft that you have to kind of put time, work, and effort into developing it, and especially on a professional
Yeah,
level where like you're
yeah,
in. So having that support system is crucial. Um,
yeah,
so
definitely.
what was,
And
yeah, what was from when you kind of were doing stuff in college? What was like big break that kind of said to you, Richard, like, yes, this is now, it's all making sense, and this is where I was destined to be?
Um, I think it was a more gradual thing. I don't think there was any moment where, I mean, the only moment that was so profound was a moment where I turned to that friend as I was walking with him. After that, the only thing I do know is that there was never, I never did a production, whether it was a play or a student film or anything while I was at university that I didn't enjoy thoroughly. So it was always just that whenever I was acting, I always knew it was what I loved doing. Um, so there was never any moment thinking, oh, I never had any doubts about it. So, I think that's one of the things that's always stayed with me is there's never been any doubt. I've never had doubt that it isn't what I really want to do with myself and my life.
Yeah, and I'm
Um,
sure that confidence kind of lends, especially in your line of work where rejection is so much part of it, and getting constructive criticism, all that kind of stuff. So to have that confidence, that's probably lends to when you go on auditions or speak to casting directors, that kind of, especially at an early as a young guy, kind of probably gave you you know, the one up maybe on some other people who didn't have that confidence, or
yeah,
didn't think
I mean,
that
I did. I never thought. I mean, I think it's important that like anyone, just if anyone's listening and they're new, is new to the art, they're young and they're starting out, is that I didn't. I always had self doubts. I would always think, am I good enough? Am I any good? And to be honest with you, that was a real driving force because I had some terrible rejections. I remember a terrible audition when I was a freshman at university. It was just awful, and you know, I, I think a good friend of mine, in fact, was older. She was about 3 years older than me. She was a senior, I think, and she was a writer. She, in fact, had written and directed that play I mentioned, The Little Prince. And I remember her saying, maybe you should just stick to writing, because it was so bad. And and a lot of that, it almost inspired me to keep going. I just thought, no, I'm going to get better. Because to be honest with you, I was a terrible actor when I was young as well. I mean, I look back now and I'm so much better even today than I was 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Um, I think one of the things that's really been important and is important to touch on at some point in our chat is that for me, a lot of it's about continually uh, working at getting better.
Yeah.
I was more obsessed not so much with fame or with any of that than with just getting better at being an actor, of like learning how to be a better actor. And so when I was at university, I was trying to be better every play, but particularly after university when I was studying in New York, and then more so when I went to drama school, and even the years after drama school when I was doing shitty little plays in small theaters, like fringe theaters with 8 people. I was constantly just trying to get better,
Yeah.
because I knew I could be better. I knew I wasn't good enough yet. I knew I wasn't as good as I wanted to be, at least put it that way.
Hmm.
And I think that's really important. So the confidence was more that I only had confidence in that I knew this is what I wanted to do, but
Gotcha.
confidence in my ability, confidence in my execution of things, confidence in, that was always wavering. And I think that's human, even wavers now. Sometimes I think, I'm not that good in that, or this, I think what doesn't waver and never really wavered, except for a brief period where I'll tell you about if we ever get to that in this story. But there's, where I knew this is what I wanted. This is what I want to do with my life. And to do it, I need to always just be getting better at it. And I also
Yeah.
wanted to be very good at it, master it. So I think it's more of that is where it's important to have. But definitely, I don't think anyone should feel like, oh, I had this full confidence that I am absolutely genius actor,
Hmm.
because I didn't. There were kids at Duke that were like incredible actors, and there were kids in my drama school that were incredible actors, more naturally gifted at acting than me, who most of whom aren't doing it anymore. I
Yeah,
think one of the
exactly.
reasons I'm still doing it as well as there's my best friend is also he's in Ray Donovan. His name is Eddie Marzen. We went to
Okay,
drama
yeah.
school together. Eddie and I went to drama school together, and we've been friends ever since. We talk almost daily. And one of the things why I think we're both still doing it is, and he's obviously incredibly successful and he's a fantastic actor, is because we just kept pursuing a kind of excellence. We just tried to learn to get better. We used to go see each other in little plays with 8 people in the audience, and us, me and 4 other people watching him, and him and 3 other people watching me at some play in London. We did that for years when we first left school, drama school, and we both studied after school after we left drama school, we went and studied with a Russian director that we knew, a teacher we knew. We kept trying to get better, and I think that's why both of us are still working, whereas a lot of people we went to school with aren't.
Yeah. And I
I think
think
it's
that's a
very important.
yeah, and I think that's a great message, Richard, for um, just anything that you do in life when you have a passion or desire for, not just acting or whatever. It could be business, it
Right,
could be,
right.
whatever, but to keep yourself open to learning um, along the way that actually lend to whatever you do, whether it be acting, your audience gets to reap the benefit of that. If you're in business and you're constantly learning what's going on in the trends in business, your clients kind of reap the benefits from that. Me being like a social worker by trade, the more that I'm open to learning different things in the field of psychology, my clients that I work with on a daily basis, they reap the benefits of that. So, yeah, definitely, I think that it's an important message to people who are listening out there that you gotta stay, willing to learn new things along the way. It's when you decide that you stop, you've learned enough. Is I kind of think
Yeah.
where you kind of shoot yourself in the foot there. But yeah, I think that's a great message to send to people, especially new actors. Need to hear that even someone as successful as you are, you're still,
Oh yeah.
looking to improve your craft. I mean, and I think that's why you're so successful is because you're constantly being open to new things in what you do in your craft, and that lends to the body of work that you've been in, which is
Yeah.
very super impressive. I mean, like I could spend a whole hour just talking about
Hmm.
everything that you have done, which is great. And so like I'm definitely like a big horror person. So how did you get into some of that? Like, is that something like
Um,
where you kind of gravitate towards?
no, it kind of found me in a way. I
Yeah,
mean, I think trying to think of the first horror film I did. I can't even remember.
you've done you've done so much.
No, I'm trying to remember. I did. Well, I did. It's not so much horror as a kind of sci-fi slash horror. My very first film was Death Machine with Brad Dourif, who is, the voice of Chucky and Oscar nominated for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and a fantastic actor. We did a film in London in the mid '90s called Death Machine, and that was kind of where I started, I guess, and working with Brad and really seeing how his career had developed, where he does, he does a lot of genre stuff, and he obviously has made a good living doing, he's been in Rob's films, been in loads of stuff, but he also, he does a lot of other work outside. So I think I was inspired a little bit by him and by actors that, yes, they've got, because Brad, like me, has a kind of very distinctive look. So it's easy
Mhm.
to cast us in horror films or in genre films like that. But at the same time, Spread Sound does a lot of other work as well. So I just try and, I honestly just try and be as versatile as I can be. But one of the things that keeps coming back is that I've done a fair number of horror films. Then, of course, once I started working with Rob Zombie and Halloween 2 and 31 and now 3 from Hell, that exposed me to a lot, like a huge group of horror fans and horror people. So that kind of has totally changed the game for me in a lot of ways, which is great. I love it. I love horror films. Always
Uh,
have, because I think horror, one of the great things about horror films is on the surface, you're there for the scare, you're there for the gore, you're there for whatever. But underneath a good horror film, which is why I love Rob's films, there are all kinds of other messages and themes that could be developed, and relationships and all kinds of, it's a great genre to explore, far more than just scaring people. I love it.
yeah, yeah.
I love it.
And I think and the reason why I kind of gravitate towards it is not only do you see a darker side of just life in general, but there's something about the horror genre that is, you see like a very vulnerable side to like a lot of the characters that are in there. Not only just like the victims or whoever, the person, is the who is kind of like the, yeah, I guess victim for lack
Hmm.
of a better term, but like the actual person that is committing the crime is like, I'm in psychology, so my mind loves to kind of dig into, or my interest like to dig into like what goes behind that, the psychological part of it that makes someone go from like a, for lack of a better term, normal person into doing something so drastic,
Hmm.
and into that darker side of the mind and human nature, very animalistic kind of stuff. So like I think that's why I'm drawn to it, and I think a lot of the characters that you play kind of pique my interest when it comes to stuff like that, and that's why I think I'm such a big fan of yours. Is that the characters that you've played have all been very intriguing outside of, like you said, the scare factor, the gore factor. They've been very interesting. I mean, like even in Batman Begins, you get to play the character that actually kills Bruce Wayne's parents, correct?
Right, right. Joe
Yeah,
Chill. Yeah.
yeah. So like you get to play, there's like a deeper part, you know what I mean? Like
Uh-huh.
the intricate part of the story, like if it wasn't for you killing Bruce Wayne's parents, he wouldn't be Batman.
Yeah,
You know
there'd
what
be
I
no
mean? Like,
Batman. Exactly. I always
yeah,
say I'm the guy that created Batman. Exactly.
exactly,
That's what I
exactly.
love. There'd be no Batman without
So
Joe Chill. Yeah, I know.
exactly.
And I'm
So
actually the first guy that Hannibal Lecter ate. So there you go. So I
yeah,
gave Hannibal Lecter a taste for
yeah.
human flesh. Um,
Love, love it. Love Hannibal Rising. Love it. I love the whole Hannibal series, and yeah. So that's like interesting in itself, like the whole um, serial killer psychological stuff.
yeah,
That
yeah.
I'm totally intrigued by all that stuff. So, how did you actually meet Rob Zombie? How did you guys? I mean, you guys do a lot together. So,
Yeah, I
how
love
were you
Rob.
guys like introduced?
Um, I with Rob, he usually will, if he hasn't worked with you before, he'll have a casting director put you on tape. So he'll audition for the roles, where he's not casting out of somebody whose work he already knows or he's worked with them before. So I auditioned for Halloween 2. I went on tape, met the casting director. Rob doesn't like sitting in auditions. He'd rather just watch them on tape. So I think if you've seen Halloween 2, there's a crazy kind of speech that I have with the other morgue attendant or whatever
Yeah,
we are,
yeah,
talking about shagging corpses. So I
yeah,
just did
yeah,
that whole scene in on tape, and it was fun as hell to do. It's so crazy. I think I improvised a bit too.
yeah.
And next thing I know, I got a phone call a week later from my agent saying Rob wanted to cast me as Gary Scott, as the character's name was. And I went off to Atlanta and we filmed. It was great because I didn't know Rob. I knew his music more than his films at that
Yeah.
point. I
Hmm.
watched his films obviously before meeting him, and then kind of, oh God, he's going to be this crazy rock and roll kind of hard, nutcase. It's just, his image is so extreme, especially if you ever see
Yeah.
his shows on, his music shows. That, when I got there, he's this incredibly gentle, smart, talented, lovely guy. He's a vegan. I'm a vegetarian. I've never been able to give up the cheese. So I always joke that, like, the first time I met Rob, we're sitting outside my trailer talking about vegan cheese. And I'm thinking, this is the guy that I was, thinking was a crazy man. And
Yeah.
we had
You're not
it was a
expecting
great
that.
shoot. Not at all. We had a great shoot. It was really fun. We shot that scene, improvised quite a bit. It was just a lot of fun. And then I actually flew back to London, and about a day later, I got a phone call because Rob wasn't actually that happy with the cow. If you remember, we run a cow over. We basically hit a cow, which causes us to go into a car accident. And Rob, it was like a prosthetic cow or something, and it looked kind of shit. And Rob was like, oh, he was really bummed that the cow looked like shit. But the fact was, it was we had to use it. It was all they had. But next thing I know, I got a phone call about it a day later saying the film had somehow gone through the X-ray machine at the airport in Atlanta, so they had to reshoot everything. So I got back on a plane that day, flew to Atlanta, shot that night, reshot everything. I think he had a better cow this time, and that's what's actually the thing. So we shot that twice. I had to shoot that whole thing twice,
Oh.
and it was just great. It went really well. And then I'd seen Rob then the premiere and things like that, but a couple of years later, I get an email or a text saying Rob wants you to do Doomhead in this new movie 31, and of course it was an amazing part, and I was more than
Love it.
excited.
Yeah,
And
love it.
he really had to fight for me too because they really wanted bigger name at that time to do that role, but he said no, I think this guy can do it. This is the guy for me, and he really fought the producers, the money people to let me do it, and hopefully I feel like I was able to give him what he needed, and it was incredibly fun to shoot, and I loved, we worked together a lot for that. Obviously, on the whole shoot, we were, working together, and he's an amazing director, incredibly creative man, and
And
then he
yeah,
got back in touch for Three from Hell. So yeah, it's great.
that
I mean,
that
I love Rob. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I love all his films. I
Mm.
think that besides just like the horror aspect of things, I think they're very creative, very well thought out. I think there's a lot of elements that he puts in there too,
Yeah.
besides
Yeah.
the horror factors that we see in a lot of other movies.
Definitely.
Very complex character relationships,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
which I
Definitely.
love all that stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
No.
and
Definitely.
and Doomhead, I mean, became such a like it hasn't even been the movie hasn't even been out that many years, and he's automatically your character is and it's probably most likely because of what you lent to that character, became like almost like an instant iconic horror character. I mean,
Yeah.
you see like a lot of the stills
Tattoos.
from
Everybody's
the
got,
movie.
yeah. And
Yeah,
everybody's got him tattooed all over him. And it's,
yeah,
I know how it cracks me up. It's great. Bring him on. But the
yeah.
thing I love, I mean, it was obviously I played him, but one of the things that I really have to give credit for is he was incredibly well written. Rob had written an amazing character. I never improvised, I don't think, hardly at all during that whole shoot because he was so specifically written and so well written. I didn't need to do any improvisation. So although I played him, and I'm very happy with the result. A lot of people have to remember that it's a whole acting is more than just the actor. It's the writing, which was brilliant, Rob's direction, and then the actors I worked with. I mean, all that stuff that I love at the end of the movie with Sherry is so good because Sherry was so good when we shot that stuff, and she was so present. She's an incredibly good actor. So all of the final scenes of 31, that stuff, which I love personally, is really down to is a lot of it's down to Sherry's performance. So it's a real um, amalgamation of all these factors that make Doomhead a character I'm incredibly proud of, but definitely
I
definitely
mean,
have to share the credit with.
the fans, yeah, the fans absolutely love that character. I see tons of like fan art and all that kind of stuff. Like you said, tattoos. People are getting him tattooed on their bodies. So like that, he did. He became like an instant like horror character, like love of people. And
Yeah.
I think the film was, you know, absolutely done so well. Um, one of one of my favorites. Even before I am, saw Three from Hell, it is one of my favorite Rob Zombie films.
Yeah.
Just because I think it's the concept of it very well done. The acting, the casting, everything was phenomenal, and I think that that kind of lends to, you know, we see all these big budget horror films and they don't do so well, and then you see a Rob Zombie film, and I mean, there's like a whole cult, you know, culture that follows all of Rob's stuff. So, and
Mm.
I'm one of those people. So when we know there's a Rob Zombie film coming out, we know that we're in for like a ride. So
Yeah.
31, 31 definitely took us on that journey of being one of those people that were kind of abducted and in the situation. I think that it was love it. It's one of my go-tos. Like when I'm around Halloween time, I'm kind of like trying to get in the mood of like the season. That's one of the movies that I'll watch, just because I
Okay.
love it. It's just your character is phenomenal in it. So going, how do you like? How do Rich? How do you prepare for something like that? How do you prepare for some of these darker, intense roles?
I mean, I use, I mean, I have a method, if you want to call it that, which has changed over the years as I've as I've grown and learned from experience. But ultimately, that I mentioned there was a Russian teacher that both Eddie and I were very lucky to have. He taught at my drama school. His name was Sam Kogan, and he taught for just 3 years at my drama school. But fortunately, those were the 3 years that both Eddie and I were there. And he was an amazing Stanislavski trained. He had studied at the Moscow Arts Theater in Russia and had emigrated to England. And we were very lucky to have him. He was an incredible teacher. And we then studied with him subsequently when he opened his own school. Afterwards, we did night school. Eddie and I would go there and do workshops and whatnot. So, the basic technique, it's a Stanislavski based, method based technique that I learned there. I still do all that. I still create a history for the character. I do all these basic things for every character I play. But in terms of like playing in that sort of idea of darkness or evil or bad guys or whatever you want to call them, I think somewhere along the way, because obviously I was getting cast quite frequently due to the way I look and or whatnot in these roles. I I kind of it really hit me that obviously everybody has these kind of thoughts. All of us think,
Yeah,
oh, I could just kill my boss, or
yeah, yeah, yeah,
damn it, my baby's screaming so much, I just wish I could throw it out the window. And
yeah, yeah,
obviously
yeah.
we don't act on those thoughts. But
Hmm.
I forget who said it, but again, actually, this quote was introduced to me, through this teacher. But it's something like, nothing human is alien to me. So,
Mm,
any human thought is not alien to us. We have these
yeah,
thoughts. So the thing, it just dawned on me that it's my job as an actor, especially one who's being cast in these kind of roles, to really allow those thoughts in my head and not to let the censor go, oh, I can't think that. So if, I'm playing a character, as I did in Hannibal Rising, who's willing to eat a child to survive, I really need to think about that thought myself and really accept that fully and not have a thought like, oh, I can't do that. I can't do that. So I just became unafraid to really allow that darkness to be in my thinking and not be censored because it's my responsibility as an actor to do that.
yeah,
So that happened to me quite early, and then it just become easier and easier. And the
yeah,
nice thing is once you do it, because it's not going to overtake you. You're not going to suddenly eat a child. You're not going to do
yeah.
these things at
Slip
all.
into the
But it's just
character.
imagination. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a big part of why I love what I do, because I get to see how complex the mind is, and
Right.
emotions and feelings, and like you said, everybody has these feelings, but what takes that person, like in my line of business, we always say people teeter very wavingly on the line between sanity and, for lack of a better term, insanity. And I'm very fascinated by the mind when it does teeter to the darker side,
Mhm.
because I feel like they're tapping into, like you said, thoughts and emotions that are there, but they don't have that filter that says I can't
Don't
act
do
on
it.
it.
Yeah.
But to be able to take yourself and not be pulled back by, oh, I can't think that way. That's like, what the fuck
Right.
are people gonna think about me if, like, that I can take it there? You know what I mean? But
Right.
that's probably why we're so um, engaged with your characters, because you do take them there, and
Yeah.
that that's what we want. That's what we want to
Yeah.
see in that role. We don't
Yeah.
want to see somebody doing it half-ass, because
No.
you know,
Well,
we,
because then they start acting. Because what happens is if you don't allow yourself to really go there, you then
yeah,
start to act with a
y-
and I put little parentheses around it. You start to like pretend to be a bad guy, and we see that in bad acting. But
yeah,
for the const, what theater or film does now is it gives us the opportunity, like you said, to have a kind of catharsis to allow someone else to go there. So it's a responsibility of an actor to to fully go to that place and
yeah,
allow an audience to witness that or experience that through them.
yeah,
Um, Without sounding too wanky. But that is basically kind of something that dawned on me fairly early on, and you just try and do that, now, and
yeah,
yeah, it gets, as I said, it does get easier, and that's the one thing that's nice about this profession. Like anything, I think, whether you're a musician or whatever, if you just keep working at it, it does get easier. When I left drama school, we had Anthony Hopkins with the actor who gave us, they'd always have someone famous,
mm,
never as famous as him, but give us the diplomas and do the graduation speech and whatnot. And he he was the guy for our year, and that was right after Hannibal,
oh
whatever, the
wow,
first Silence of the Lambs. So he was
yep,
huge then too. We were very
mm,
lucky. I think they'd booked him the year before, and the movie came out that year. And so all of a sudden, they were like, "Well, that was a good move booking him." So he was our graduation speaker, etc.
that's
And I remember I
that's
ran into
cool.
him shortly afterwards. About a couple months later, I ran into him, and he said to me, he was asking me how I was getting on, and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm auditioning and I'm meeting, agents or whatever I was doing." And he said, about acting, he goes, all he said was, "It gets easier. Don't worry, it gets easier. Acting gets easier, son." And he's Welsh like me, so we got on quite well. And I now, 30 years later, I really see, the more we pursue it, the more you do it, whatever you do,
Hmm.
it does become easier. It does
Yeah.
become easier to do all these things.
Well,
Um,
I mean, like, when you get that advice from Anthony
yeah,
Hopkins, I mean, like, I mean, I guess that set the tone for, I find everything happens for a purpose and a reason. To have Anthony Hopkins um, present and speak at your graduation kind of was like setting the tone for your career, and kind of giving you like that advice. I mean, when it comes from somebody like that, and
yeah,
all their accomplishments, and it kind of
yeah,
gives you like you said earlier on, like that support. It's another form of support for you as an actor getting into the field, that they're letting you know that it does get easier, but you just got to work at it, and the more
yeah,
that you work at it, the easier it will become. So I mean, I would fucking die if Anthony
yeah,
Hopkins gave me something like that, to take on with. I mean, then you can apply that with anything in life, not just acting. The
yeah.
more that
Oh,
you
for sure.
work on
Yeah,
stuff that goes on in life, like parenthood and all that
yeah,
kind of stuff, the more that you work at it, especially
yeah,
those things that don't come naturally,
yeah,
the more that you work at it, the easier it becomes. So you go from doing, and what I've noticed a lot about Rob's films are, you know, when I guess he finds somebody. I mean, and you can tell me if this is right or wrong, but when he finds somebody that um, kind of fits with what he's doing, they tend to reoccur in other characters in other films, and that kind of lent to you being from, being in 31 to going into Three from Hell. I mean, what is it like to then go into like this, because it is almost like a trilogy of films. How do you like get into um, being part of such a, you know, House of a Thousand Corpses?
Iconic group. Yeah.
Yeah,
It was,
iconic.
yeah, because I mean, and going back to something you said, I mean, I do agree fully with about what you said about Rob's work being far more complex than it seems on the surface. I mean, if you really watch like Three from Hell, one of the things I think that's and his best film. I think Rob would
Yeah,
agree. I think it's incredible how he's growing as a filmmaker. Strong. I mean, I loved his early films. His first film was brilliant, but what's so great is that the complexity of the characters and the relationships in Three from Hell. It deserves a second watch, a third watch. I've seen it a couple of times now, and every time I see it, I see more and more in it. I mean, it's much more than just a film about a bunch of crazy killers running around slaughtering people. It's far more complex, and also very much crosses many different genres. It's almost not a horror film in a lot of ways.
no, I
Um,
was just gonna say that it's like, um, it's more of, for me as the in the audience, it was more of a kind of the only thing that I can attribute it to, and I think it was even more badass than that, was like the whole concept of like natural born killers, where
mhm.
there's these, you're almost like rooting for them
Oh
to
yeah,
succeed. You know
definitely.
what I mean? And the relationship between them, and how they're like, how I was taking and perceiving it as like they're like these three people on their own, and it's like the world against them, and how
Hmm.
their affinity for each other as a family, because
Hmm.
ultimately they are a family,
Hmm.
and how they take that relationship and just bust out like everything that kind of is the norm of what we see. And like, I mean, you get no more extreme of family love than what you
Yeah,
see in that film, you know.
yeah,
um
yeah,
I was, you absolutely said it, you know, right, and I want to validate that, is that I didn't like, by the end I was like, wow, this is not like your typical, this wasn't like a horror film, you know what I mean?
no,
It was like,
no,
it was so much more than that when I left the
yeah,
theater. And
yeah,
I do
no,
agree that this was like one of his best films.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, and
Loved it.
definitely his most complex, and and like the relationships between not just Baby Otis and Foxy, but also if you look at even the smaller relationships, like the relationship between Baby and the Dee Wallace's character,
Yeah,
uh, prison
the
guard,
prison guard.
and then right, and the warden and his brother-in-law, Kevin Jackson's character, the two, the guys that come into, they who we keep in the house, in the whole house scene in the middle. Um, they have you can really feel their relationship because they're brother-in-laws as well as work colleagues. And there was a couple of scenes that were cut out that they had together, that Rob didn't feel were necessary because the relationship was so strong just from the moments you see them together, and you don't see them together very much, and yet I can really see the relationship. I'd forgotten those scenes were cut out, but I could see their relationship, the relationship between the warden and his wife, Daniel Phillips and his wife. You can, it's incredible, all the little relationships, the relationship between Poncho,
Hmm.
character at the end, and Baby, I mean, I just, I mean, I love that, and all the performances, even the smaller performances, even the people at the beginning in the documentary who are just praising, um, Baby and Otis and Captain Spaulding. I love them. They seem very real. Those little news clips that Rob has created. Um, so yeah,
Yeah,
I really think that there's such complexity to the film itself, and it's sort of a peck and paw film, and it's got so many different things going on. I'm very, very
yeah,
proud of it. I'm proud
yeah.
to be a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you guys are seeing how the fans are reacting to the film. I mean,
Yeah,
it
it's been
was in like a
fantastic. I've
limited,
been really, really pleased
yeah.
with the reaction. It's been incredible, actually. Because
I
going
have
back
to
to what
tell
you
you,
asked originally, that question about coming into it, I mean, I was obviously a little anxious because, I knew that Captain Spaulding wasn't going to be in it very much for reasons that Rob's explained. And I came into the process very late. Just literally a few weeks before filming, and so I wasn't sure how it would all fit, but I just trusted Rob. I trusted the other actors, Bill and Sherry in particular. We clicked right on the first day of shooting. I'd obviously knew Sherry well and worked with her, but I had never worked with Bill, and everything, it was just incredible how it all just seemed to click, and I could feel something growing, and it just grew throughout. And we improvised, we do all kinds of things to kind of find it, and I just trusted that it would work, but I didn't know until 2 weeks ago when it opened, and the reaction has been as it has been, really fantastic. And people have, talked about how there's this interaction between us, and the way people have reacted, and is really, it's again, hats off to Rob, who just kind of made it work. I mean, it was a tough thing to do because obviously, because of Sid's health, he couldn't be in it as much as he had wished, as originally intended. And Rob made that work. Made this film work, and not just work, but turn into his best work. It's incredible.
yeah,
Incredible
absolutely.
how he
And
orchestrated it.
we sadly lost Sid
Yeah,
pretty
last
recently,
week.
and yeah, and it's another iconic actor and character, Captain Spaulding, in the whole horror genre. I mean, like, you can't talk today
Yeah,
about
I mean,
horror and
huge.
not
Yeah,
talk about Sid.
no,
But it was great that now we as fans get that last piece of it. There was, like a almost like a chapter closed in the whole
yeah,
series of the Firefly family, that we got to see him be part of this, even if it was like 30
yeah.
minutes of the
Yeah.
film. Yeah,
But
we
he's
got to
amazing.
see.
I mean, he has that speech that
I,
he does, and it's incredible.
yeah, I mean, it was very, very emotional, for us, the viewers, to see that, such like a sensitive side of that. Like, it was just bringing um, another layer of like a different color of the movie, if you will, like, of
Yeah,
seeing that side of it, of him, being, because we're so used to seeing him in like such a badass, like, I'm gonna fuck you up, like, type of situation, and then to see him in that very vulnerable role, when he's sitting there and making that speech, it's just like, it kind of gave me chills. And like, a lot of us knew kind of what was going on with Sid, because it was in the media and stuff like that,
yeah.
that he was not feeling too well. And to see that, to
Added
have
another layer.
for the
Yeah,
fan, a little piece of that in this film was phenomenal. So I'm glad that you guys
yeah,
were able to kind of capture that for us. And I mean, I'm so happy that it's being re-released on October 14th, right?
yeah.
Uh,
Go see it
Yeah.
again. Yeah,
Oh,
it's worth
I
the
definitely
second
am.
vision. It's great.
I mean, I
I
got to
promise
tell
you,
you,
I enjoyed it
even,
more the second time. I really
yeah,
did. I mean, obviously, when you watch something the first time, it's always that you're in. You're always kind of like, oh, he cut that bit. But the second time, I really, really got so much out of it. But I'll tell you, it's interesting. I watched this at the premiere for the first
mhm,
time, and about about 30 minutes from the end, I was so sucked into the film. I've never had this happen on a movie that I'm in because I know the plot. I know what's going to happen next. I
mhm,
remember shooting a bit going, oh yeah, we shot that, and that's when Poncho didn't want to eat lunch because he, or whatever. I remember, you remember a story, and I actually was sucked into the film. I was actually kind of almost didn't know what was going to happen next,
oh wow,
during the scenes at the end, and I thought, wow, that's when I just thought this is a great. I'm really proud of this to be a part of this film. I mean, it's
yeah,
really, I've never had that experience in 30 odd years of acting. where I've watched something that I'm in, and I actually was watching it for the first time and sucked into it.
Oh wow.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
it
mean,
was weird.
I actually was, it was pretty cool because I didn't know this, but I went to see it and in the theater at a Regal Cinema, and I was expecting Three from Hell to start, and it actually was, unbeknownst to me, I didn't know it was a double feature. So we got to see Devil's
Oh, you went
Rejects.
on the Wednesday. Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
then immediately after it was Three from Hell. And like I spent a lot of time in the movie theater that day, but I wanted more. Like was left with the movie when it, the credits started to roll. Like I was like really, I really felt like it was a good film. I wasn't just watching just a horror movie. I mean, but like all Rob's movies, I kind of gravitate towards because of the complexity of it all, and the relationships. But this was like totally different. I feel like it was like on a different level of his work. I was
yeah,
very proud of, all you guys did a phenomenal job. I mean, the relationships, the connection. I think Sherry is great. She's awesome.
yeah.
Uh,
She's awesome in
and
it. Yeah,
and just the camaraderie and the relationships in the film. I just everything about it I just really loved. I was very much rooting for everybody at the end, and like just walked out of there. Like I'm glad it's being re-released because I definitely am going to go see it again and bring a bunch of
oh,
friends
cool.
that haven't
Yeah, I
seen
do.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, cool.
Is there, I mean, I don't know if you know this, but is there any possibility for like, is there going to be more films that we're going to see with the three of you guys?
You never know with Rob. It took him 14 years to do this one. I just figured he'll send me an email or a
Yeah,
text
right.
one day going, "Are you available in a couple of weeks?" And then I'll be like, "Yeah, of course I am."
Yeah.
So we'll see. It's
I'm
just
hoping because I
you
think
never
that
know.
the three of you are like some pretty badasses, and I think there could be like a whole nother saga there, with the Firefly family, and to continue the legacy of Sid and all that kind of stuff, and I would absolutely love it. I'm sure like I wouldn't be the only fan that would love that. So
No,
hopefully, like you said, maybe we'll see
let's
that
see.
coming down the road.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I'll have to wait.
Yep. So, Richard, what projects do you have coming up that maybe we can kind of anticipate that, we can see you in some stuff?
I did a movie. It's out now. I think you can get it on, Amazon and all those usual iTunes and whatever people rent. Called Perfect Skin, which
Okay.
is a small little indie film I shot in London a couple of years ago, and got released in August in the States. And that's I definitely would love people to check that out, especially going back to what you were talking about in terms of the complexity of so-called bad guys or evil characters. I think one of the things that really appealed to me when I started working on this film, and I think it successfully does, is this character is not, he's a guy that basically kidnaps a woman and tattoos her whole body. I mean, and hangs her
Oh,
from hooks. So that's kind of the tagline, if
nice.
you want to put it. But the reality is he's driven by, he's not a psychopath. He's actually driven by very complex motivations. And he's actually fairly character that you feel some sympathy towards, sympathetic character. And, it was a challenge kind of bringing that sympathetic nature to the role. And I feel like it worked well. And it's not a film that a lot of people have seen. There's no big names, there's no big budgets. It's a little film with small release, but definitely recommend for you to go check it out if you're into that kind of film.
Abs- and what is it called again?
And Perfect Skin. Perfect
Perfect.
Skin. Um, and then I've got, a rhythm section, a Blake Lively movie I did with Jude Law. That I have a nice little moment or two in that film that's coming out in end of January. And I've done, I pop up in a bunch of stuff coming up. I can't even quite remember. Um,
You do
I've
so
done
much. I
a
mean, I don't know how you.
number. Yeah, I did a movie called Feedback, the movie I was shooting before I finished, before I started working with Rob on Three from Hell, and that has Eddie Marzens in that, actually my friend and myself. that we shot in Spain, which is a thriller, a psychological thriller / horror as well, which is, I think it may be now available in the US. If not, it should be pretty soon. It's called Feedback.
Feedback.
And then, like I said, yeah. And then I can't remember how much other stuff I've been filming. I've just done Brave New World, which is an adaptation of the novel, which is coming out, I think, on USA sometime next year with Alden Ehrenreich. I should pronounce his last name properly. He played Solo in the Han Solo movie. He's a really he's a great actor, really great actor. And Demi Moore, I played her boyfriend in it, her ex-boyfriend.
Oh, wow.
It was quite fun. It's quite fun. I had a couple episodes. It was quite fun working on that, meeting her, and she's an icon from my era.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So it was fun to play her ex-alcoholic or alcoholic ex-boyfriend. He wasn't an ex-alcoholic. He was still liked to have a drink, but that was a lot of fun. So yeah, I've been, I pop up quite a bit in the next.
Quite busy there.
Year.
Quite busy. Well, yeah, that's what we want.
Like I said, it goes back to when I was walking home from that rehearsal with my mate and saying I want to do this the rest of my life. So luckily for me, so far, knock on wood, it keeps going.
I think that you've had a great career over the last 30-something years that you've been doing this, and I think we're gonna see you in a lot of things, and you have a tremendous fan base out there, including myself. So I'm really excited to definitely will check out some of these projects. Perfect Skin, Rhythm Section, Feedback, Brave New World. So people out there, just keep an eye on this stuff. Go see Perfect Skin wherever streaming services, check it out, see if you guys will have it. And Rich, I really
book your tickets for October 14th. 3 from Hell. Last chance to see it in the cinema. And it should be seen in the cinema. So go for it.
Absolutely, I totally agree. You have to go see it in the theaters, and it's playing in selected theaters. So check out to see where in your area. I'm actually going to post in the comments of this video and this podcast where people could go check it out, because in select theaters they're actually doing 30-minute like directors kind of like cut scenes and stuff that were in it. So people could kind of if I definitely want to go check that out, because I want to see some of the scenes that have maybe not made it into the actual film. So people definitely will. I'll put in the comments of this podcast where people can kind of go check it out. And Rich, I really appreciate you taking the time and just talking to me about your career and craft of acting. I think you're phenomenal. I think 3 from Hell is a movie beyond just being a slasher kind of psychological thriller kind of horror movie. I think there's so much there that people will absolutely love if they haven't seen it already, and I really appreciate you taking the time with me today, all the way from London in your busy schedule with everything, to sit and talk to me about everything that is Rich Brake. So thank you very much for being part of it.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Had a good time.
I'm glad you had a great time. So everybody, this is the Unnormalized podcast with your host Frankie A. and phenomenal actor Richard Brake. And I want everybody to kind of go check out everything that Rich has coming up. Perfect Skin, Rhythm Section, Feedback, Brave New World, and of course 3 from Hell. Go out and check it out in your local theaters. That's the Unnormalized podcast, and everybody get unnormalized.